Hey church, welcome and thank you for worshiping with us. Wherever you're worshiping, in your home or on your TV, laptop or phone, you are a part of this family. And you could watch or listen to past messages by heading to mycornerstone.family. On our sermons page, you can view playlists, search for past messages, and more. You can even listen to our content by subscribing to the Cornerstone America's podcast, which can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. I hope you enjoy the message and thank you for being a part of the Cornerstone family.
All right, so let's get into the message this week. We're talking about Palm Sunday today. What a exciting week it was approximately 2,000 years ago. So many churches around the world today are celebrating Palm Sunday. It's the beginning of Holy Week. It's the day when the start of this week is when Jesus rode into Jerusalem. It's been called the triumphal entry. It's also been called the tearful entry. We'll talk about that. And I don't have slides today. We'll have my scriptures, but I don't have slides. I was getting ready to point to some things. But it starts off with Palm Sunday as Jesus enters into Jerusalem. And we have Maundy Thursday, which Monday comes from a Greek word that means command. On Thursday, Jesus gave his disciples a command to love one another as he's loved them. So very important. Then Good Friday, which we know why we call it good. It wasn't a Good Friday, but we know it's good because Jesus was resurrected on Sunday. So we have Good Friday and then Resurrection Sunday. And of course, we'll have a Good Friday service here this Friday at 7 p.m., which will be very somber. It's probably the only somber service we do. I think every service we have here is pretty much celebratory because as Christians, as the followers of Jesus, we have a lot to celebrate. And so coming together is a time of celebration. It is a time of great joy because of what Jesus has done on our behalf in the relationships that we have around us. Because of that, the future that we have and in the present peace and joy that he gives us, we have so much to be thankful for, so much to celebrate. But our Good Friday service is somber, and we do it for a reason, because we want to, on this one day, feel the weight of what Jesus did for us. We want to feel the weight of our sin, which drove him to the cross. We want to feel the weight of what he did on our behalf, feel the weight of all the pain and all that he endured. So it is a somber service, but I think it's needed. I think at least once a year to remember that and reflect upon that. And then we come in Sunday morning celebrating because he has risen, which is always exciting. So let's jump into our text this morning, John chapter 12, verse 12. We should have the scriptures up here next to me as I go through them. And so we're talking about Jesus entering into Jerusalem as he's getting ready to go to the cross. And many people were thinking that he was going to be a military conqueror, that he was going to come in like King David, take over, defeat the Romans, and kind of liberate the Jews. But he comes in a very humble, peaceful way, which nobody really suspected, very interestingly enough. And it really shows us the kind of heart, the kind of king that Jesus is. Interesting side note, we're going to be in John chapter 12, but interesting thing about John, as we've been in it for the last eight weeks or so, is that the first half of John chapter 1 through 11, which we just wrapped up John chapter 11 last week as we were talking about the 7 miracles of Jesus, the first 11 chapters of Jesus are written around 7 miracles that Jesus did that really point to who he is. And that first part of John has really been called like the book of miracles because it's all wrapped around these 7 miracles that we just spent over 7 weeks talking about. The second half of John has been called the book of glory. It's very interesting. John chapter 12 that we're in is a transition, and it's dealing, the last chapters, the last half of the Gospel of John is dealing with Jesus' last week. So the first 11 chapters is dealing basically with all of his ministry time. And then from chapter really 12 and 13 on to the end, it's dealing with his last week. So John gives us a ton of content that has to do with Jesus' last week. It's the book of glory, and he looks at it as Jesus being glorified. So he looks at it a very interesting way, a very positive way was he's being glorified so that we could enter into relationship and fellowship with him. So it's a great gospel. There's so much in there, and so we're going to stay in there today as we have this kind of standalone message here on Palm Sunday. So we're taking a special look in this text of Jesus' heart. This week, remember that this week was Jesus' most difficult week that he lived out while he was on earth. And in this week and in this day, Palm Sunday, we get a look at his heart and the kind of king that he is. So we really get a chance to see him at his most difficult point and see what God was doing in him and how God was going to bring about our redemption through him. So again, what's interesting, as he's getting ready to go into Jerusalem, the crowds are packing into Jerusalem because of Passover. There could have been 1 million plus people there. So the streets were buzzing. It was busy. It was a very celebratory time. And Jesus is coming in, and this triumphal entry becomes very interesting. And this chapter in our text specifically is full of paradoxes. The paradox of Jesus and the kind of king that he is. And so I want to kind of stress that in my message today, in my points today, is the paradox of this, because Jesus is the king that they didn't expect, but they desperately needed. And Jesus is the king that we don't expect, but we desperately need. And the big idea here is that Jesus came in as a king who doesn't rule with a sword, but he rules with the cross. And it makes him a very different king. And so following Jesus is full of these paradoxes about how we actually enter this kingdom and what this kingdom is really about. It's really an upside down kingdom and just kind of opposes the ways of the world. So Palm Sunday is full of paradoxes. As Gabe pointed out, as he enters into Jerusalem, they're saying, hail him, and then by later in the week, they're saying, nail him, nail him. So it's full of these interesting paradoxes. So let's look at 5 of those this morning. The first one is he is praised as king, yet he heads towards crucifixion. And we look at John chapter 12, verse 12, and hopefully we'll have these up here for you. It said the next day, the great crowd that had come for the festival heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. So there was a crowd already there. They heard he was coming, and they were really expecting that he was going to take over and be this conquering king, that he was going to liberate them from Rome, from the oppression, and he does none of that, what they were expecting. In verse 13, it says, they took palm branches, and they went out to meet him, shouting, Hosanna. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel. And this has been called, obviously for this reason, the triumphal entry, because the crowd has gathered and they're waving the palm branches. They're laying them down before him like a red carpet, having the king come into Jerusalem. And they are expecting that he would save them. And probably coming off, if you just know the context of the story, Jesus had healed a blind man, and he had been hollering out, Son of David, have mercy on me. Son of David, have mercy on me, which was letting Jesus know that this blind man thought that Jesus was the Messiah, and Jesus heals him. And so maybe this helped spurn this group on, and so now they're saying, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And Hosanna means save us now. That's what it means. And so they were expecting to be saved now. It's like Nike's slogan, just do it, this is like, save us now, Jesus, save us now. And this was their slogan, Jesus, do it now, just save us now. This was the idea behind it. And so these people were thinking that this is what was gonna happen. And so they expected not just a celebration of a Passover, but this king, this Messiah, to come in and take over. He had already raised Lazarus from the dead. He's proved that he had authority over everything. And so he comes in to Jerusalem. So what's interesting, though, the people were looking for a national redemption, but Jesus was coming in to give them a personal redemption. And this is where they had missed it. In Luke chapter 19, verse 41, it says, as he approached Jerusalem, he saw a city. I'm pulling out of Luke here. He wept over it. As he's entering Jerusalem, as he approaches Jerusalem, he says he saw the city and he wept over it. And this is why it's also called the tearful entry. Not just a triumphal entry, but a tearful entry, as he weeps over Jerusalem as he rides into it. Luke chapter 19, verse 42, it says, this is what Jesus says, if you, even you, had only known this day what would bring you peace, but now it has been hidden from you. So he is weeping over Jerusalem because they don't understand why he's there. This is the paradox of it. They're yelling, King, save us now, yet they don't understand how that saving grace is coming about. They're expecting something totally different than what he's getting ready to do. And Jesus is weeping over the fact that they have missed the point, and they could have had something different if they knew what to expect, if they knew what he was doing. So the same voices that say, hail him, as he goes into Jerusalem, later potentially saying, nail him, as they want him to go to the cross. So the application, I think, for us today is, do we worship Jesus for who he is, or just for what we want him to do? See, they thought they knew what they needed. We need to be delivered from Rome. But Jesus said, no, you got something much deeper that you need. You need a personal deliverance. You need personal salvation. The question is, do we just worship Jesus for what we want out of it, what we think we need out of it? Or are we willing to push what we think we need aside and say, Lord, what do I need? Maybe you know better than I do. Another paradox that we see in here is that he comes in humility, yet he declares himself a king. Man, when a king comes into town, he doesn't come in humility. He comes with force. He comes with strength. He comes with great glory, but Jesus goes in with humility. Look again at John chapter 12, verse 14. Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it. As it is written, do not be afraid, daughter Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. Now, Jesus gets a donkey. He rides in on it. This is not by accident. This is the only time we have Jesus riding in the Gospels. Everywhere he went, he walked, as far as we know. This is the only time we have him riding. So he's doing something very singular here, very different for a reason, and he's fulfilling Old Testament prophecy. So when he rides in on this donkey, he is saying prophetically, because of the Old Testament scriptures, that he is the Messiah. He is the Messiah, and he's coming. That's what he said, do not be afraid, daughter Zion. See, your king is coming. This is what the Old Testament says. Your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. So Jesus rides. It's not a long ride. This is probably about a 2-mile ride that he was taking. Most people are walking. He rides in to make this point. He's riding into Jerusalem because it's a very prophetic act about what he's going to do, why he's going there. He's going there to be crucified. He's not going there to be crowned a king. He's going there to be crucified. Riding on a donkey was an act of humility. He is humbling himself. We serve a humble king, and it was a prophetic act. Now, what's very interesting about donkeys, kind of an interesting correlation here, that donkeys, if you notice, if you've ever seen it on their back, the way their muscle and their hair goes, it almost looks like a cross on the back of their neck. Got an interesting side note. But he's riding on this donkey. He's not riding on a horse. If he was riding on a horse, he'd be coming in great power. He would be showing that he's a king, but he's coming in humility. He's coming with peace, so he rides on a donkey. And what's even more interesting, if you think about what this may have looked at, because it wasn't just a donkey, it was like a baby donkey. It was a colt. It was a young donkey, a small donkey. So can you imagine a grown man riding on a little small donkey that had never been ridden before? It was a little bit funny. It was a little bit wild. It was kind of unusual. It's almost like if I had a picture today of Gabe riding a little tricycle. If you could imagine Gabe on a little tricycle, I mean, his knees, because he's so tall, his knees would be like up in his chest. And you know how you pedal really fast, but you're not going very fast. You're oversized for the scene. I mean, probably almost every dad in here did this at one point, right? You're out playing in the driveway with your kids, and there's a little tricycle, a little bike, and you got on it, and you just start riding around. You look like you're in a circus or something, because you were too big for the bike. Jesus is too big for the donkey. He's too big for the colt. So it's like a parody. It's almost a comedy as he's riding in on this donkey, kind of bouncing around, one that had never been ridden, oversized for the donkey. It becomes very interesting as he rides in on this donkey. Mark chapter, let me go back. So interesting thing is about this is that they believe at this time, on this day, that Jesus is riding in from the east gate on a donkey, and on the west gate, a great military leader is coming in, riding in with all his army, all his troops, not all, but a great amount of them coming in. Herod's coming in, and he's saddled on a horse and showing his strength. So you have these two leaders coming in, one showing humility, one showing how strong and how great he is. On the same day riding in, Jesus riding in with humility, showing his humility. And what's interesting is when he gets into Jerusalem, I imagine the crowd that's with him is expecting him to do something great, to do something big, to maybe start the takeover. And in many of the Gospels, it feels like that's when he cleanses the temple right away. But I think Mark has it down here, Mark chapter 11, verse 11. It says, when he entered Jerusalem, he went into the temple, and it says he looked around at everything, and it says, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. So he did nothing. He rode in with his great pomp and circumstance and humbling himself. He gets in there to the temple, he looks around, and it's late, and he goes back out to Bethany for the night. And I imagine those that were following him in and expecting him to do something great at that moment were probably a little shocked and disappointed that he didn't do anything more than just simply look around and then leave. It becomes very, very interesting, this story, and the intentionality of the paradox of what is going on. And so you have Jesus, who is the ruler of the universe, yet he rides into Jerusalem in a very humble way on a donkey. And it's intentional, because Jesus rules through love, and his love transforms us. It's a different kind of kingdom. It's the paradox of the kingdom. The ways of the kingdom are different than the world's. And so this is the paradox. He's the rightful king of the universe, yet he comes lowly and not lofty. He deserves the throne, but he gets on a donkey. He has all authority, yet he rides like a servant. This is the kind of king that we have. This is what Jesus did on our behalf. The application of this becomes, what kind of king are we following? Do we understand what kind of king Jesus is? Are we still expecting a kingdom of comfort and control? Or are we willing to follow a king who calls us to humility, surrender, and sacrificial love? This is what he calls us to. He did this as an example. This is what he calls us to. He doesn't call us to comfort. He doesn't call us to control, but he calls us to humility, surrender, and sacrificial love. That is the call that is on all our lives. The king on a donkey invites us to lay down our lives, to embrace peace and follow him, to be obedient. All right, so the third paradox we see here is his followers are close to him, but they're confused. They're clueless to what is happening here. And we see this in John chapter 12, verse 16. It says, at first his disciples did not understand all this. They did not understand all this. Like what was happening? Why was he doing this? It says, only after Jesus was glorified did they realize that these things had to be written about him and these things had to be done to him. So even though his followers were close, they were with him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for about 3.5 years. They get down to this final week and they are clueless about what's happening. So his followers are close, but yet they're still confused. They didn't understand. And here's the thing about this. Sometimes as followers of Jesus, we may be close to him. We are following him. Sometimes you ever feel a little clueless about where you're at in this process? And you know what? That's okay. There are times when we feel a little clueless. That's the paradox. We may be near Jesus, but we don't always understand all of his plan. You could walk with Jesus, serve Jesus, and still not know what he's doing until after the fact. And that's okay. Proximity doesn't always mean clarity about what he wants to do. Jesus was revealing his identity and fulfilling prophecy and heading towards the cross, and they missed it. They didn't understand it till afterwards. We follow the one that sometimes, even when we don't understand what he's doing, but we continue to trust. That's our application. Sometimes we're following him and we don't understand what he's doing, but he calls us to trust him even when we don't understand it. And that happens, and that's okay. But that's the life that God has called us to. Will we trust him even when we don't understand, when it's not clear? Have you ever gotten on the other side of that situation? Maybe like what Gabe was saying today. You got on the other side of that situation like, that's what it was. That's what I should have done. Those happen. You get on the other side, that's why I'm trusting, because I didn't know that was going to happen. A lot of times that happens. We just keep trusting even though we don't understand. We keep following his word even though we don't understand. That's what he's called us to do. That's faith. The just shall live by faith. We shall walk by faith and not by sight. Do we do that? How well are we doing it? Trusting him when we don't see it, trusting him when we don't understand, continuing to walk his way, what we know to be his will, even when we don't understand. That is one of the trademarks of the Christian faith. Following him when we don't understand the whole plan. That's key to our life. All right, how about the fourth paradox here is Lazarus, that this miracle that Jesus did speaks so loudly, yet we have no words of what Lazarus ever said. Isn't it interesting? You got a guy that died and was raised from the dead. I honestly would like to have a conversation with him, wouldn't you? I mean, I would like to, especially since Jesus was on the scene. He was a big part of that, and so I'd like to, let's hear, what do you have to say? We have no record of Lazarus saying anything, and yet the crowds are coming partly because Lazarus is there. This becomes very interesting. Look at John chapter 12, verse 17. He says, now the crowd that was with him when he had called Lazarus from the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to spread the word. We have no idea what Lazarus is doing. Verse 18, many people, because they had heard that he had performed this sign, went to meet him. So you have people coming to him because they heard about this miracle. And yet Lazarus is not sharing any of this that we know of. We don't know what he even said. And so we have this miracle that speaks loudly, though he remains silent. Such an interesting paradox here, that his life, the fact that he is alive, is drawing people curiosity. They want to come see Jesus. They also want to come see Lazarus. I want to see this guy that was dead and raised. And it draws people. It becomes very interesting. And here's, I think, the paradox. The man says nothing, but his life says everything. So the question becomes, or maybe the application for us becomes, is our life telling a story? Is our life telling a story of what God is doing in our life? I mean, that's why they came to see Lazarus. They wanted to see what God had done in his life. And I know we need to verbalize to communicate the gospel, but also, how are we living? Are we living? Does our life, by people watching us, do they see something different in us? Do they see a story or God's story in our life? I mean, it just draws curiosity, may draw wonder, may draw some other things too, but that's okay. But do they see something happening in our life? I mean, a life raised, a life changed, a life filled with God's presence is going to tell a story, and people around us are going to see it. Do they see it in us? All right, let's go to the fifth paradox here. Here he is rejected by religious leaders, yet he's drawing the world to him. Like the religious leaders that should have known who he was. You got to remember, these religious leaders, man, they knew their Old Testament scriptures, right? New Testament was not written. They knew their Old Testament scriptures really well. They had, from an early age, memorized the first 5 books of the Bible, and then later these religious leaders memorized the entire Torah. They memorized the whole Old Testament. So they had a lot memorized. They should have known. They should have had, there were clues in the Old Testament they could have seen, but they didn't see him. In verse 19, it says, so the Pharisees said to one another, like this is getting out of hand. He says, see, this is getting us nowhere. Look how the whole world has gone after him. So people are coming to Jesus because of Lazarus and the miracles that he did. The religious leaders are rejecting him. The very ones that should have said, hey, wait, this could be the Messiah. Look what he's done. Look where he's from. Look how this happened. This could be the Messiah. And yet they are rejecting him, but the world who doesn't know the scriptures like him are coming to him and believing in him. Now, and in their terms, they're saying, look, the whole world has gone after him. That's the paradox. The religious leaders missed it. The world is seeing it. The application for us, let me ask you, what pride or fear might keep you, or maybe is keeping you from surrendering your life to Jesus? What pride or fear in your life may be keeping you from surrendering your life to Jesus? The Pharisees had a pride in their life and a fear, I think, of Jesus and what that meant for them, and a pride for their status in their society and stuff, and so they were rejecting Jesus. But we all struggle with pride and fear in different areas of our lives, and sometimes that hinders us from surrendering an area of our life to Jesus. Like, what will he make me do? What is he going to ask me to give up? Or I want to hold on to this relationship, and I can't really surrender my life and hold on to this relationship at the same time. What is it that we're holding on to, just like the Pharisees were holding on to something that stopped them from surrendering to Jesus? Because he comes after those areas of our lives that we're holding on to things, and he asks us to surrender those. As Jesus goes on in this text, John chapter 12, verse 23, Jesus replied, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." And verse 24, "Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed, but if it dies, it produces many seeds." Jesus is talking about his own life, that he was going to sow his life. He was going to give his life for many. And if he would give his life, it would end up in many seeds. He knew that if he took his life and he gave it, that God would multiply it, that he would bring it back. And here's the thing, he asks us to do the same thing. He asks us to do the same thing. Look, John chapter 12, verse 25. "Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life." He says, are you willing to give your life away? Jesus came, he said, "I'm willing to give my life away for the world." And he invites us as his followers to do the same. Are we willing to give our life away, our own ways, our own will, our own desires, and say, "God, what do you desire? What's your will for my life? What's your way?" And follow him with our lives. He said it like this in verse 23. He says, Luke chapter 9, verse 23, he says, "Then he said to all of them, whoever wants to be a disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Are we willing to deny ourselves and pick up our cross and follow Jesus? And then he goes on with the same in Luke chapter 9, verse 24, "For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will save it." He says, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet lose or forfeit their self? Becomes very interesting. Let's go back to John chapter 12, verse 26. He says, "Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor him, honor the one who serves me." He said, if you're going to come out, if you're going to serve me, you're going to follow me, God is going to lead you the same way of denying yourself, picking up your cross, and following him daily. How well do we do at that? Some days pretty good. Some days struggling to hold on to it for ourselves. This is the kingdom, the upside down kingdom that Jesus instituted, that he birthed through denying, again, himself and following God's path, that he invites us into, that he invites us to follow. This is the king we didn't expect. This is the king of holy paradoxes that through his sacrifice gave way to the birth of many, that he gives us into. This is the way of life. This is the king who weeps over the lost, who rides in peace, not pride, who sacrifices himself for the salvation of the world. This is what he's setting up for going to the cross. And all those that were seeing him could have been putting all this together. Sometimes not so easy to see as it's happening, but on the backside, his disciples were like, wow, we got it. And here, still 2,000 years later, we get to look back and like, wow, this is what he did. Will you stand with me this morning as we get ready to close in prayer? As we go through this week, Palm Sunday, this holy week, Palm Sunday starting today through Good Friday, Resurrection Sunday. Now, I know for some of us it's going to be a busy week. But maybe if we could take some extra time each day and just reflect on what Jesus has done for us. How he denied himself, stepped out of heaven and came to earth. Humbled himself, even to death on a cross. For you and for me, for every person around the world, and what that means for our life. And maybe in that reflection, think about how well am I doing? Lord, am I following you? And that's really, I tell you, one, a simple prayer, easy prayer, a prayer I pray often, Lord, I just want to follow you. I just want to follow you with my life. And you know, I say this frequently to people I talk to as we're talking about walking through life. Paul's most common analogy for the Christian life is simply a walk. He said, the just shall live by faith, or walk by faith, not by sight. That the Christian walk is a walk. The Christian life is a walk. And sometimes we want it to be something faster than a walk. We wish it was different. We just wish things would happen quickly, but yet it's a walk. It's one step in front of the other. And the one thing about walking, we all can walk. We all can take a step. It may not be fast, but it's a step. What's your next step? How are you doing at taking every day and just putting one more step towards Jesus in your life?